Hey there, trail trekkers and tall tale seekers. You're tuned in to the 406 Life, the podcast where Montana Max, your Bigfoot buddy and outlaw gear mascot, yeah, that's me, leads you through the wild, weird, and wonderful corners of Montana. Each week we share stories, legends, and laughs from the last best place. So grab your boots and sense of adventure, because we're about to make some Montana-sized memories. This episode's powered by Outlaw Gear, where rebels get their style. Want to look legendary? Mosey over to I'mAnOutlaw.com and claim your outlaw status. Let me tell you something about Butte, Montana. It doesn't sleep the way other towns sleep. You can walk through Uptown after midnight, and even when the bars close and the streetlights hum and the wind comes rolling down off the hill, there's this feeling that the place is still awake. Not haunted, just aware. And if you make your way to Mercury Street, just a few steps from where it brushes up against Venus Alley, you'll see a brick building that doesn't look all that special at first glance. 3 stories, old windows, faded sign. You could walk right past it. Most people did for decades. But behind that brick facade sits one of the longest operating brothels in American history. The Dumas. Built in 1890, closed in 1982. Nearly a century of business conducted behind doors the whole town pretended not to see, while absolutely knowing they were there. Now here's the thing. This story isn't about scandal. It's about systems. It's about how a booming copper town built 2 economies, one in the sunlight and one just out of view. And if we're going to talk about the Dumas, we're going to talk about it honestly. No cheap thrills, no winking ghost tour nonsense, just history, with the lights turned on. In the late 1800s, Butte wasn't charming. It was violent with opportunity. Copper money exploded this place into existence. Men poured in from Ireland, Italy, China, Cornwall. They dug tunnels miles under the earth in heat and darkness that would make a modern OSHA inspector faint dead away. They worked, they drank, they spent. And between Park Street and Mercury Street, stretching behind Maine toward Arizona, a red light district grew so steadily that it became as permanent as the head frames on the skyline. The National Park Service doesn't mince words about it. Prostitution was a major industry in western mining towns. In Butte, it operated for decades, almost uninterrupted. That's not gossip. That's federal documentation. In 1890, Joseph and Arthur Nadeau built the Dumas at 45 East Mercury. Ownership listed under Delia Nadeau. It wasn't a converted house. It was purpose-built, which tells you everything. This wasn't an accident of morality. It was architecture designed to serve demand. Upstairs, you had parlors and larger rooms. Skylights let in daylight. Furniture was better. The space felt almost respectable. Downstairs, basement cribs, small, tight rooms, narrow corridors, low ceilings. The walking tour documentation and Montana Historical Society research describe it plainly. The building itself illustrated hierarchy. If you earned more, you worked upstairs. If you didn't, you worked below ground. Mining town symmetry. Men underground by day. Women underground by night. Now listen up, because this part matters. The women who worked in the Dumas weren't cartoon villains or scandalous caricatures. They were workers in a constrained labor market. Mining towns offered few economic pathways for women. Domestic work paid little. Marriage wasn't security. Independence cost money. Women in high-end parlor houses were expected to maintain expensive wardrobes and appearance, often at their own expense. Debt followed many of them like a second shadow. Some were very young. That reality appears in documented accounts of the district's peak years. So when we talk about the Dumas, we don't romanticize it. We recognize it as part of a system that Butte tolerated, because it kept the copper machine humming. Ready for your next Montana home? Visit mostwantedrealestate.net, because that's how the West is sold. Now here's where Butte's practical streak comes into focus. As reform pressure built in the early 1900s, officials didn't shut the district down. They shifted it. Solicitation moved off the main streets and into the alley between Mercury and Galena. Venus Alley. A green board fence was installed to shield activity from public view. Out of sight, not out of business. That detail reveals how Butte handled growth, pressure, and reality in its own way. This town didn't erase vice, it managed it. Through the 1910s, the 1920s, the 1930s, the Dumas continued operating. Even when wartime public health pressure in 1943 shut down the alley cribs, the Dumas adapted. It reportedly operated under the guise of a rooming house or hotel. Alley-facing openings were reinforced, security tightened, and the decades rolled on. Imagine the layers of time in that building. World War I, the Depression, World War II, the Cold War. All passing overhead while the same staircase carried footsteps up and down. By the 1950s and 60s, rooms were remodeled. A payphone appeared inside. A payphone. If that image doesn't give you a grin, I don't know what will. History doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a rotary dial and cigarette smoke. Then came Ruby Garrett. In 1971, she bought the Dumas and stepped into its final chapter. According to historian Ellen Baumler's research, Ruby later claimed she paid local police $200 to $300 a month for silence. $20 a customer. Now, before anybody clutches pearls, remember, Butte had been managing this arrangement for nearly 90 years. It wasn't secret. It was tolerated. Until October 3, 1981. An armed robbery occurred at 45 East Mercury. The Montana Supreme Court case State versus Madera references it directly. That robbery drew scrutiny. And scrutiny is what changes everything. Soon after, Ruby Garrett was charged with federal income tax evasion. Convicted, sentenced to 6 months. Agreed to close the Dumas and pay back taxes. And just like that, after nearly a century, prostitution at the Dumas ended in 1982. Not because Butte suddenly grew moral wings, because the paperwork caught up. Now here's where the story shifts from operation to preservation. In 1990, Rudy Garrett purchased the building and opened the Dumas Brothel Museum. And what made that powerful wasn't theatrics. It was absence of erasure. The building hadn't been gutted. Many rooms remained largely intact. Fixtures survived. The physical space itself became the archive. Later came restoration efforts, ownership disputes, loan attempts, structural repairs. In 2018, the building sold at tax deed auction for $29,000. $29,000 for a structure that once sat at the center of an entire shadow economy. History can be priceless and undervalued in the same breath. Need shipping, shredding, prints, or a real street address? Helena's locally owned and operated the UPS store has you covered, located at 2047 North Last Chance Gulch. Stop by and get it done right. And yes, there are ghost stories. And I don't mean the plastic pumpkin jump scare kind. I mean the slow burn ones, the kind people tell quietly, the kind that don't change much from telling to telling. The most famous is the woman with the suitcase. They say she appears on the stairs, not rushing, not floating, just walking, carrying a small case like she's about to catch a train that's already whistling down at the depot. The story often ties her to a mid-1950s madam, a woman said to have been planning to leave town. Suitcase packed, future mapped out. Death ruled natural causes. but rumors never quite settled. Suicide? Broken heart? Something darker? Now here's what we know. The death ruling is part of the retelling. The rest lives in oral tradition. Employees in the 1970s reportedly described seeing a woman pass a bathroom door and descend the stairs, then vanish. What makes the story stick isn't the mystery, it's the image. A woman almost leaving, but not quite. Then there's the artist, an upstairs room, a rented stay, quiet nights. And according to the story, he became fixated on painting a woman's face. Again and again. Same face, same eyes, same expression. Until he couldn't sleep. Until he left. No documented medical episode, no police report. Just a story that keeps resurfacing like a copper vein. Some visitors claim certain rooms feel heavier than others. Current operators have spoken publicly about conducting paranormal investigations. People talk about voices, cold spots, a room that feels occupied even when it's empty. Now listen. Old buildings make noise. Wood contracts, pipes shift. Wind pushes through cracks. Basements hold cold air. And when you walk through a place layered with secrecy and human intensity, your nervous system goes on high alert. But here's the part I can't shake. The Dumas isn't staged history. It's preserved history. Tight basement corridors, low ceilings, narrow beds, skylights above, layers of paint, scratches on door frames, wear patterns on stairs from decades of footsteps. You don't need ghosts when the architecture itself tells you people lived complicated lives here. But human beings are storytellers. When a place feels heavy, we give it a shape, a face, a suitcase. And Venus Alley is the perfect setting for that kind of folklore. Narrow, echoing, brick walls that trap sound, snow piling along the edges in winter, footsteps that bounce back at you like someone's walking just behind. Stand there long enough at night and you'll hear things. Maybe it's wind, maybe it's memory, maybe it's your own heartbeat reminding you that you're in a building that saw a century of secrets. That's the kind of haunting I believe in. Not floating figures, but history that refuses to evaporate. And that's why the ghost stories endure. Because whether or not anything supernatural ever walked those stairs, something real did. And here's what I think. When you stand in a preserved space where real people lived complicated lives, where secrecy, survival, money, risk, and power all collided, your brain fills in the gaps. You don't need ghosts. You need walls that remember. And the Dumas remembers. It remembers miners climbing those stairs after 12 hours underground. It remembers women calculating debt and survival. It remembers reformers looking the other way. It remembers the night the robbery changed everything. Sin and shadows. Not as spectacle, as structure. So if you walk past 45 East Mercury Street tonight, don't just think haunted brothel. Think system, think survival. Think about a town that built wealth above ground and compromise below it. And if you love stories that peel back Montana's layers instead of just skimming the surface, give this podcast a 5-star rating. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. And if you want the full documented blog post with every source laid out, head over to the 406life.com. Because around here, we don't just chase ghosts, we chase truth. Montana Max, over and out. Got a Montana story, business, or unsolved mystery you want on the show? Head to the 406life.com and drop me a line. No smoke signals required. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a stomp, stumble, or tall tale. Tell your friends, tell your grandma, heck, tell that guy who swears he saw me near Whitefish. I was just buying donuts, all right? Until next time, keep it outrageous, keep it kind, and keep living the 406 life. Montana Max, over and out.
That's the force